Committee. Okay, good afternoon. Call this meeting of the Historic District Commission's Organizational Focus Committee to order. It's Friday, September 9th, around 3 p.m. Present for OFC, myself, Dale Oliver, and can a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Great, thanks. All in favor, ayes.
Aye.
No opposed. No minutes. Ezzy, I believe, is still working on minutes. We encourage people to grab some popcorn and watch the on the YouTube machine video. Catch up with everything that's been going on. First order of business is the HDC RISE, Resiliently Integrating Sustainable Energy Work Group related. Discuss and take action on the interest forms. Just to give you guys a quick, what we're going to do is, since the RISE work group hasn't actually been formulated yet, Val and I are going to discuss this, and then we'll take comments from public, including people who are sitting at the table who have been serving as liaisons type persons, one of which who has already submitted an interest form. So just to recap, we received one interest form. There was a timeline issue, I think, with and perhaps an a communication understanding issue with Andy's. But we received one letter, one interest form from Bruce Mendel. What I'd suggest is that we would make a recommendation to the HDC to appoint Bruce to the work group, and that we would want to open the notice up for another week.
Okay.
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it does.
And we put the interest form out there again, and at that point, Andy, you could submit yours. And if you're still interested, and then you'd be within the notice period and the open enrollment period, so we're not dealing with some, oddity at a later date.
I submitted mine last night.
Yeah, Wednesday was the deadline, my
Okay.
friends.
Question.
Wait one sec, please. Any other thoughts on that?
No.
Okay, comments?
Just have a
Bruce.
question in light of the recent disbanding of advisory groups and the town council's opinion about the HDC's ability to make appointments without going through the select board. Does this RISE committee fall under that?
I was wondering that too.
No, and the reason is that this was approved at the town's legislative body, which is town meeting. So the work group and the appointment by the HDC
Thanks.
as part of the article. So that is my understanding based upon comments I witnessed watching the other discussion on other work groups in the past, including, I think it was brought up at the very early on when the short-term rental group was being formed, or when they were having discussion at the select board level, at the select board meetings with town council. And Bruce, as we will encourage other members, as we've discussed in the past, we would ask to please just touch base with the state ethics office, make sure that there's no conflict. Their information is available on the, if you Google it or DuckDuckGo it. And that would be beneficial for you and for the work group. If there is a conflict, for, obviously for us to be informed. We don't need to know the details, where it's not our business. But if the state ethics for some reason says there's a conflict and this is what you should do, and what you should do is not be sitting at the table, then obviously we want to know that. I don't anticipate that, given you submitted an interest form and there was no indication of a conflict, but I just want to be clear for the public.
I went through that with the senior tax program to work at the clerk's office, so I can do it again.
Okay, yeah, I mean, it's just, you can make a call to them and give them the information, and they'll give you an opinion. That is binding. Any other comments on the interest form? No. Okay, great. So we'll move on to discuss and take action on the WPI project, cooperation and collaboration with the HDC, OFC, and RISE and related matters. So where we are on that is a couple of different places, actually. You all received a email through Esmeralda from me that included the interest form, a copy of which included the charter for the work group, a copy of the WPI student project, the initial description that was sent to me from one of the sponsors, and then the revised WPI student project description that was presented to the HDC.
I don't think I got that, did I?
Esmeralda sent those out yesterday at around 3:40.
I didn't see any attachments, though. I didn't see it either.
Okay, well, I can ask her to resend it. So the attachments basically, you can take a look at the interest form you're familiar with, the student project form, the description form. One included the kind of controversial notation about the HDC, that many people believe the HDC is an obstructionist, I'm paraphrasing, but not by much, entity with respect to adopting sustainable energy and in the face of climate change, and with a footnote about the island's going to need a third cable, which did seem to members of the HDC to be a bit more than controversial and unnecessary. The second sheet that was included was the updated WPI student project description, which eliminated that language. This email I'm referring to that had that attachment included the vote taken by the HDC in regards to the WPI student project. As the project was proposed to the HDC, the motion was that the WPI student project be sent back to the organizational focus committee to request that if the HDC is to be involved, the student project is to be made to come in conformance with the HDC work group's charter. And the organizational focus committee membership are to sit as liaisons to the project, and if necessary, sponsors. The primary goal being to identify where we being the current sponsors, the town's energy coordinator, who by the way is with us here this afternoon. Thanks, Lauren, for being here. And the town's preservation planner, Holly Backus, to identify where we have goal on behalf of the town and on behalf of the HDC, identify where goals are not aligned to determine how to work around them in the report of the student project, and then to move on to get onto the business of aligned goals and deliverables, and also to incorporate what information met the HDC's goals and deliverables. The HDC voted on that, was unanimously approved. Just as a refresher, I'm going to paraphrase out the charter of the HDC RISE group because it was relevant to the motion. Was to update, the work group is to assess and recommend guidelines that promote integration of sustainable energy in a manner that furthers the HDC mission. And so that the HDC could undertake the review of its guidelines to promote responsible, sustainable energy installations that do not negatively affect the island as a historic tourism resource. So that's a bunch. That's in the email that you were sent yesterday afternoon. It brings us up to date with where the HDC has progressed in terms of being updated, having been presented the WPI student project, and how the HDC would like to address it so that its needs can be met.
Do we have any copies of that?
Not here, but we'll have that re-forwarded to you. Subsequent to that, we received an email from one of the sponsors, I believe it was on behalf of both sponsors, indicating that for what I thought was kind of peculiar, that it was in the best interest of the WPI students and their learning experience that the project scope shift away from direct involvement of the HDC or the solar work group. We will have the letter, we will ask that the email be read, won't be read into the record, but be entered into the meeting record. Goes on to say the project will be co-sponsored by the town of Nantucket and Nantucket Preservation Trust, and will focus primarily on how Nantucket can address climate change and enhance energy resiliency without compromising the island's historical character. The WPI students will assist the project sponsors by researching technologies, resources, and solutions that support locally appropriate solar applications. This will include interviews and various stakeholders and comparative research on how other historic communities' islands balance the protection of cultural resources with the need for increased renewable energy. Deliverables may include updating and enhancing the town's interactive solar map to include corresponding HDC notes or key preservation design details of interest, conducting a public survey to gauge public perception versus reality when it comes to the viability of solar in Nantucket, producing educational resources to inform the public about the municipal permitting process for installing solar, such as case studies, checklists, or brochures. Lauren goes on to say, we hope this addresses your concerns by alleviating the work group's role in this research project. I'm going to make a couple of comments on it, and then I'll ask for your comments, Val, and then I'll open it up for discussion. I started by saying I thought it was odd or peculiar or something to that effect that that the lead-in was that, as I believe we can all agree, it is in the best interest of the WPI students and their learning experience that we shift the project scope away from direct involvement of the HDC or the solar work group. If pressed, I'd have to suggest that student interest and well-rounded experience includes real-world problem solving, including at least a glimpse of how professionals work to identify and reconcile or work around incongruent goals, all to transparently advance diverse community goals. It seems like a healthy, well-rounded, and beneficial real-world experience. I would also ask, and this will be in a letter form, the definition of locally appropriate solar applications. What viability of solar on Nantucket in particular means with respect to public perception versus reality when it comes to the viability of solar in Nantucket. And what parameters, if any, this portion of the project will include what parameters will be on within the project with respect to comparative research on how other historic communities, islands balance the protection of cultural resources with the need for increased renewable energy. And finally, I think I would say that this, to me, does not address the needs and concerns of the HDC that have been expressed over the course of 3 meetings or more and voted on by the HDC. And it doesn't address the goals and deliverables that have been brought up. Hi, Lauren, I see you there. It doesn't address the goals and deliverables that have been brought up by the Organizational Focus Committee or the public who've been attending and commenting. And I think, frankly, it's unnecessary. I think it's a disservice to the community. The WPI students are a resource that the HDC would never have otherwise, to look into important information that could help the HDC's work group make an informed decision. And I think that it's conceivable that this shortcoming leaves the HDC work group in a position where it will fail, or at least sufficiently so that we'll be back at town meeting next year reviewing this very same issue, as opposed to if we had the assistance and the help that we had asked for. We have been told that we should be looking to be cooperative and collaborative. We've asked to be cooperative and collaborative. We volunteered to become involved. We volunteered projects. Tim Carruthers, who's in the audience, was here. He has volunteered some comments on potential goals and deliverables. Andy Buccino, Bruce Mandel, and obviously myself and Bill Oliver. To me, this just seems very, it's unfortunate. It's not our call, but if you didn't read the email, I wanted to update you and I wanted to give you some insight on my own perspective, not just as the member of the HDC who chairs the Organizational Focus Committee, but also as the member of the HDC who stood on the floor of town meeting and asked the voters to give all parties an opportunity to sit at a table, both literally and figuratively, once the work group was established, to be heard, whether they were a member or not, to come up with real solutions. And again, I believe that the WPI students could have been a huge asset for the community in developing that. I know that's a lot, but I've been thinking about it, and those are my comments. Val, would you like to comment?
I would if I had the thing in front of me, but.
Well, this is the email we received from Lauren yesterday.
Bell hasn't read it yet.
No,
Well, you were in the-
I read it quickly, but this isn't the email.
Yeah, this is not, this was subsequent. The email that that Lauren sent, I read out loud.
Oh,
It's this email.
I think for me, the
Against
concern that I had was the survey part of it. That's been my concern the whole time. And I think I gave Polly a copy of the first thing with some notes on it. I don't know if she shared that with you. How I thought it could be phrased so that it was more, shouldn't say more, less negative toward the HDC.
And just on that comment, what came up at the HDC meeting was that the HDC, by other members, not Val or myself, that the HDC should be involved. So it's not in a position that a survey or other work product ultimately is actually something that I think the words were clobbers the HDC over the head. As the HDC is an adjudicatory body and it doesn't make decisions in a regulatory nature based upon surveys. And that there was information that the HDC could use if the students could collect it. We talked about useful life. We talked about some of the topics we've discussed of probably 10 or more. Initial were, useful life, trade-offs, reclamation, different information that could inform the HDC on both the permanence and likely long-term effects of solar on Nantucket. And
Well-
is that accurate in your mind from the meeting?
Yeah,
Okay.
and stuff like if it can't be on the south, but it can be on the west, what percentage would they lose? Could you, you know what I mean? That kind of stuff. Yeah.
Right, based on regional norms and manufacturers who are typically used here. And so there's national guidelines based on the natural setting, but we would be looking for specifics relative to Nantucket. So that's also a lot, but it is an update on where we are. Do you have any other thoughts on that?
No, can we just take the survey out?
Well, it's not up to us, and I'll ask Lauren for input. But what we've been told is that it's been changed to benefit in the best interest of the students and their learning experience. So we won't have any involvement. My concern is not, I just want to be clear, my concern is not just the survey. My concern are goals and deliverables that we've sat at the table and discussed, because I think they're important that they be incorporated. Lauren, if you'd like to speak, you're welcome to.
Thank you. Hi, everybody, Lauren Sinatra. So the intention of this WPI project, and for those who are aware of what this program is, junior engineering students get sent to Nantucket to do some research. These projects are meant to be real world, fun, enjoyable, fact-finding, collaborative, a positive experience for these students. We thought that they would be a resource to this work group. We brainstormed this idea before these organizational focus meetings occurred. Our timing was a little off. We were anticipating this happening along the same timelines. And since then, I can only speak personally. I've been discouraged by the lack of acceptance, coordination, alignment, positivity, encouragement. I just do not think this is the right atmosphere. It's a charged atmosphere. It's not an engaging, constructive atmosphere to bring these students in. So we are moving in a different direction. We will be interviewing stakeholders, and that will include designers and solar owners such as Ray Pohl. I think he's always been a great participant in these studies. But while it was our hope that the WPI students would support the success of this work group, because they do great work. They love doing research. They're here for several weeks. They're dedicated. This is just not presently the right forum to bring them into. So we are now co-sponsoring the project with Mary Bergman, Nantucket Preservation Trust, We're going to be focusing on best practices, updating the solar map, focusing on resources and education for the public on the town's permitting process. HDC is part of that. Your voice is very important, but I just, for their own sake, for our sake, this has not been a healthy experience so far for any of us.
I feel like it got dumped on us though,
I
Really
can't even believe what
fast.
was just said.
and
Yeah.
we made some suggestions about changing some of the language. Mine I thought was very nice. I wrote it nicely, sent it to Holly, like, instead of saying this, could it be like this? It's not as. We're not an obstacle, it's because we want to incorporate more solar, and I guess you never got
I
that.
didn't get it, and Stephen, I've tried to reach out to you, I've invited this conversation, so it didn't have to be in this forum, it never happened. So what I will say is it's a very organic project and process, we don't know who these students are, we don't know their strengths or weaknesses. And the scope and deliverables change. We don't even know if there will be time for a survey, we don't know who will be interviewed. It's not so structured and it cannot be micromanaged to the degree that I think Stephen's envisioning, it's just not realistic. So I've sponsored, I want to say close to 8 or maybe close to 10 of these projects in the past. And it's never been in such a supercharged environment. And I just have major concerns, there are red flags already.
Okay, I'm gonna speak, I apologize before anyone else, because I've got to set the record straight. Lauren, I think you're putting words in my mouth. I've specifically stated in these meetings, and if you review them, that the goal of the HDC, the needs and concerns be addressed on behalf of the HDC through the Organizational Focus Committee, and not in a way that micromanages the project, but in a manner that the sponsors open their arms, instead of just saying we want to be cooperative and we want to be collaborative and we expect the HDC to do that, that it would be a two-way street. What we found instead is when we asked for our needs and concerns to be addressed in a meeting forum, we were at a later date told that and pointed out that goals of the town and the HDC are in many ways incongruent. And we wanted to identify what those goals were and how they
We
were.
talking about
Well,
a meeting that was,
Actually, I didn't interrupt you. I'd ask you to please hold on.
I don't have time for this.
Okay, well then,
I
it's
said
like,
we're moving in a different
okay,
direction. all
thank you,
of
Lauren.
may
I
be-
appreciate it. It's kind of like I take my ball
Wait,
and I'm gonna go home and play with it.
wait, don't-
So that's
I
unfortunate.
can't. This is
I want to ask a
case in
question.
point. You can engage with me
Yes.
afterwards.
I want to continue. I have invited Lauren to have offline conversation directly. Instead, I got an email that that told me that I was personally attacking her, which is not the case. If you watch the meetings and the meeting in point that she referred to, you will see that. I think it's very unfortunate that as opposed to getting on board with being open and accepting, or at least discussing the concerns that we brought forth, instead of just shutting discussion down, that this, our idea was to come in here and, while it's not necessarily a fun-filled environment, it would be a collaborative environment, a positive environment. I think you all have experienced that in the discussions I've led, that those are my goals and those are my acts. I think it's very unfortunate to try and brand someone, and frankly, wrong, as otherwise when that's not the case. And again, I find it's unfortunate that we're kind of in this situation where it's my ball, I'm going to take it and play with it, when this is supposed to be a work group that is the student work project is supposed to be benefiting the HDC work group. It is not meant to be, my understanding, a standalone. And if it is, then why is it involving the HDC, or, for instance, best practices? What best practices? Why is the HDC not involved in helping determine what the scope of that is? That's not a micromanaging aspect to this. I manage hundreds of people. You need to set out clear expectations, help clarify what is expected through the process, and if you want to have useful information to make informed decisions. And with that, I entertain whoever would like to speak. We'll just do it in order. Bruce.
No, thank you. I'm quite experienced in surveys over the last several decades. I've done many surveys for the folks out in Mattocket, for the Conservation Association and this area plan folks. You know, we use various formats, Survey Monkey and like that. And it's, you have to be careful. And that's what my concern was here about how you craft your questions.
Well, that was
I understand. And I'm not sure that that message was taken as an objective comment, because it's not unusual, I think, for someone to take suggestions about their work effort as a personal attack if you don't quite agree with what they are putting forth. And if we're going to have a way to get what was mentioned as stakeholder input, it's important to understand who those stakeholders are. And let me just give you an example. The Coastal Resilience Plan had a list of stakeholders. And the people in Mattocket asked, we would like to be considered stakeholders. We were told by the town, you're definitely stakeholders and you will have input. We didn't, because their contract with the folks doing the study had a different definition in their contract of what stakeholders are. And it turned it out, it was like 4 or 5 town employees. So the whole West End didn't have input into the coastal resiliency plan because they were stakeholders, but not stakeholders. Mistakes were made, omissions were entered into the report, and we were told we could address those in 10 years when they redo the study.
well, that was why we had concerns about the original.
Let me circle back to where we are here. When they say they're going to have stakeholders now ongoing in the process of what they're doing, I think it would be prudent to ask who the stakeholders are and get a little input from people who aren't listed as stakeholders, but perhaps should be. So the importance of the research that these undergraduates are going to be doing, I think needs to be a public thing. And the objective of what their research is and how it's going to be used needs to be understood, especially if it's going to be applied to the HDC or to the RISE committee or to whatever else. There ought to be a way to have a collaboration in a positive atmosphere, and where criticisms and concerns are not necessarily taken personally when they're not intended that way.
I don't think you'd see we did disagree with that. We had one opportunity to see the original, what is it called? Original,
The project description.
yeah, and we made
Yeah, one
comments. I put mine in writing. It was simply rewording things, so I felt it wasn't, let's point the HDC out as being an obstacle. And apparently that didn't get shared with her, which is kind of disappointing.
Maybe it still could be.
Okay.
Well, no, it's done now. They
Well, I think we're, our interactions with that group have been
beat a
branded
dead
and
horse.
we're not going to be interacting with them. Tim, please.
So I did watch the HDC meeting, I think it was last Tuesday,
Hmm.
where the WPI project was discussed. And it did come across from the audience perspective that the HDC were concerned about hearing things that they didn't want to hear. And it did come across that the HDC wanted to control the work and the messaging of the WPI project. So I sympathize with Lauren, and I actually support the move that she's made. I think it would
Because
be,
it drums up more business for someone.
Val, please. But in fairness, Tim, you should identify, if you have a special interest, you should disclose that prior to speaking at each
sure,
meeting.
of course, no.
So why don't you do that now, and then we can move on objectively.
My name is Tim Carruthers. I am the Director of Operations for Xmart Energy, which is a solar installer on Nantucket.
Thank you.
So I'll recap. So I did watch that interaction, and it came across as if the HDC was concerned about hearing what they didn't want to hear. And so to heal, and I have worked with the WPI students before, I've been engaged with academia many times before, and I agree. I think that we should not bring them into an environment like that. I don't think that's, they should not have handcuffs. They should be able to go off and do pure research and do whatever surveys they want to survey and make that's public domain information, make it available, and people can use it and see it however they see fit. So that's my opinion on that.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else at this time?
Yeah, I'd say that the spirit of collaboration has been missing from the beginning. I don't know the timeline as far as the presentation of the WPI study or the work group as it aligned with the goals of this group. But I feel, having sat in on the first three and missing the last week's meeting, that it was already not the right spirit for collaboration. And it was a challenge to bring it into alignment. The last meeting that I was in here, when the three of us and Bruce brainstormed some opportunity for that collaboration, while we made a reasonable list, and I think probably that list is in the spirit of the focus of this work group. If we don't have a open dialogue with the group that is going to be doing a study, then there's no way that those are going to fall on proper ears, so that collaboration could kind of come to fruition. So in my opinion, having sat through all these meetings, I haven't seen an opportunity for any real collaboration. I don't know what behind the scenes had happened between yourself and Miss Sinatra as far as communication, and this isn't the place to deliberate that, but there's, in my opinion, not been an opportunity for real collaboration between those two groups. And I've made clear my opinion that as a stakeholder, the Town Energy Office, and in hindsight, Holly Backus's efforts are really critical to the success of this work group. And you made that clear, or suggested that maybe, may hamper the success of this committee moving forward without their presence and action. So that's a concern of mine, and I don't know if there's an opportunity to resolve this. Doesn't sound like there is. So I'm concerned at our opportunity for success without that input from these groups.
Thanks, Andy. I'd like you to clarify for me, when you say that there hasn't been an opportunity for collaboration, you're referring to, I'd like you to expand on that. Prior to going into discussion, your comments, discussion has been that the HDC is trying to control the process. I think that I understood you to actually be saying that the HDC, which, the scope of the HDC's involvement has been us sitting here at the table, coming up with ideas as needs for goals and deliverables. That I'd just like you to clarify, are you saying that there hasn't been an avenue of collaboration from the HDC side or from the WPI student project sponsor side?
Maybe mutually. There hasn't been a channel of communication that I've been able to participate in, despite some effort.
Efforts by who?
I've reached out to Nantucket, to Lawrence Sinatra individually, and also the list that we came up with in our group was kind of in my opinion, kind of a last minute throw together. Let's see if we can come up with some ideas for them. But we weren't invited to the table to actually have that open dialogue with them. Whereas if Lauren and Holly were sitting at the table at that time, we may have had an open dialogue. But that clearly would have had to have been negotiated beforehand so that we could sit down at the table and have a really clear, distinct dialogue. And that was never an opportunity.
For us.
Yeah, for us.
Yes, and last minute, I just would like to clarify, we were presented the project in July. Our interaction, so we quickly went about trying to come up with ideas that would help the goals and objectives of the HTC. And that was the last minute nature of it.
Yeah, you mean the last meeting that I was here?
Well, no, even before, the initial interaction, the first initial formal interaction with the sponsors of this study was when Lauren presented and discussed it. And then subsequent to that, we put it on our agenda in order to be able to discuss topics, which we then did. But it was last minute in the sense that the students were developing the instructor was developing the syllabus, and we had not had an opportunity to be given any input. So for me, I saw that, I read that as, well, how are we being cooperative and collaborative if we're not being given an opportunity to contribute? We aren't even given an opportunity to be cooperative and collaborative. So I think that that's an important distinction. The other thing is my community, I want to underscore my communications with Lauren on this have been at these meetings. Other than to follow up with an email when I was told that we hadn't expressed, that we should express our needs and concerns in writing, I recapped what had happened at the July meeting. Tim is referring to, he says last Tuesday, that meeting was more of kind of an ad hoc discussion. He's not referring to the meeting that Lauren was here. Lauren was not present at the last meeting, nor was Holly. Ultimately, I want to back up this concept that the HDC work group is, just bear with me, I'm looking through my notes here. A couple of things. One, a comment came up with the HDC is, Tim's comment was not wanting to hear what it didn't want to hear. That's not untrue. We've made no bones about that, but it's very specific to the regulatory nature of the HDC. The HDC functions under an act, and that act is to preserve and protect the historic character of the island and the setting of the National Historic Landmark. It's incongruent to have a survey done on behalf of the HDC or purportedly on behalf of the HDC that will then turn around and say, well, you have to go against your regulatory mission because whomever have been surveyed, who we would have no control over in any sense of the word. I'm not saying directing to the cross the T and dot the I in the period, but absolutely no input on. That survey and its results is a direct conflict if that were the survey, which I was led to understand it would be. Perhaps I misunderstood. That survey would create direct conflict with the HDC as a regulatory authority. It would not be unlike, and I think I used this example of with hyperbole, that the latest greatest thing in energy technology is this really large, pink, multifaceted, shiny object that you hang on the front of your home that fills the front of the home. And everyone in the community is saying, yes, we want one of those. Well, the HDC's hands are tied because the HDC is a regulatory agency that is clearly inconsistent with the historic character of the island, as are, by the way, solar panels. There is no historic context for a solar panel on a roof. I'm going to finish what I have to say, and then I'll let you all talk until you're done. These were comments that were made. They were made objectively. They were not made in a personal nature, which I have stressed time and time again. If I have a certain look that someone feels is objectionable, I apologize. If someone feels that they can't take that information and not internalize it as a personal attack, I also apologize. But that's not what this is about. This is, I want to hit a couple of different points as we go. Both at these meetings and at the HEC meetings on recordings and tape, I have lauded both our preservation planner, the town's preservation planner, and the town's energy coordinator for their individual personal experience and knowledge. I have repeatedly stated that we think that they're incredibly valuable, not just to this process, but to the town, and that we would like to be involved with them, and we would like for them to want to be involved with us. These are, things that when I heard comments earlier, seem to have been, either not heard or just kind of left off the record. Objective versus personal. This idea that the students would come and just do pure research, I don't think you'll find any problems with anyone at the HDC about that, or anyone here. However, you don't just, if you have a goal or an overview type of a goal, a higher level goal, they're given that goal and a subset of goals. Our understanding, and this set the tone for wanting to have cooperation and collaboration and pushing for it, was that those students were told in a document that the HDC is an obstructionist entity and helping to overcome climate change. And the footnote was that a third cable is going to be necessary for the island, and the sponsors are trying to overcome that. That seemed to us, correct me if I'm wrong, and to the members of the HDC, to be kind of an awkward start to cooperation and collaboration. So we felt that we needed to identify very clearly what it is we were looking for. And in fact, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but your comment after that meeting was that you appreciated the clarity of mission and you thought I was spot on. I think it's very unfortunate, and I'm very concerned because the nature of this kind of cancel culture and personal attacks, to have someone sit in a meeting and brand you as being not fun-filled and positive. Look at me. I'm one of the most fun-filled and positive people you're ever going to meet. But seriously, on the nature of cooperation and collaborative, that is a horn I've been trumpeting all along, subject, however, to this being an HDC work group needing to meet the HDC's needs. I'm going to say one last thing on this. What we originally suggested at the meeting was to identify goals or areas where we had incongruent goals, the town and the HDC, to determine how we have a discussion on how we would work around them or through them. So then we could establish that in a transparent manner, and we could move on and focus on the goals and objectives, the goals and deliverables that would be important for both parties. The last part of that was the suggestion that we would partition parts of the report so that where there were goals that were incongruent, the town would have its say from the information, the town would have its ability to have the pure research done and reported on, and the HDC would have its section, and we would have an opportunity to have the pure research from the regulatory nature of our role and our charter. It would also give these students and people who read the report an opportunity to see where over the course of the process, in a summary statement, the two parties have bridged whatever they've bridged in terms of the incongruent goals, where they've been mitigated or directly overcome or otherwise. So, I mean, for me, it seemed like a very positive experience because it's a real world experience. It's like how people should function in life, to my mind. Maybe I'm wrong, but you come in contact with people, they mean something to you, they're important for you to work with. When I say people, I mean, I'm not speaking necessarily about a particular person, I'm talking about the institutions, the organizations. You identify where you have a conflict, you identify where you can work through it, you identify where you have alignment, and then you set about your business. That to me seems like a very collaborative experience and one that could be beneficial to students.
The comment that you just made, was that in a dialogue, or was that an email, or was there?
Which?
The comments that you just made about collaboration and sitting
Yeah,
down
those are in
and
the,
finding where there's
Yes.
a difference between the towns.
it's our July,
Towns needs.
I believe it's our July 21st meeting. Or it was the 5th, I don't have the exact date. It's in a letter to Lauren. I think I sent it to her. If not, it's in my draft folder. I'll send it to her when I get back. Those are on tape. All that's on tape. This isn't new. This was from the beginning when we were presented by the town's planner, preservation planner, and the town's energy coordinator with a description of the project. We immediately identified that we had needs and concerns that we had asked to be addressed. I laid out this other aspect of it. I talked about breaking it down into a two-part with a summary, showing where we bridge these things and so on and so forth. Subsequent to that, I have not been able to speak to Lauren. I have stopped by her office a couple of times. She's a very busy person. I acknowledge and understand that. I have offered to speak to her. I want to clarify that because She mentioned that she had invited the conversation and it never happened. I don't think that that's a fully accurate portrayal of the record. It's a part, yes, she invited conversation and it never happened. But I've sought out conversation and it never happened. It wouldn't be fair for me to say that. It would be fair for me to give you the context. I went by, she was busy. I went by again, she was busy. Fair enough. I thought I would run into her again before things kind of took a left turn or right turn, whichever way you want to put it. How about a hard turn? And we did not have an opportunity to speak. So I think it's important. We're a small community. It's important to be clear. We have an obligation to one another and the community to try and work together in a way that is responsible, that doesn't throw mud, that isn't a partial replication of the record. Because we are a small community, and frankly, I think that that's just a common courtesy. Who would like to speak?
Yes.
First of all, I'd like to know, is there anyone who has any concerns at all about what I just said? And if you do, please articulate them.
You do talk for a long time, Stephen.
Yeah, well, I got a lot to say.
And frankly, you know, I feel like I want to respond to some stuff, but 10 minutes later, you put a whole bunch of other stuff on the table. So I would, as.
Pen and paper. It's called notes. We let each other speak. We make notes. and
Okay,
then
well,
we
let us
respond.
finish.
Yeah.
So, look, I feel like I want to remind everybody why we're here, right? Which is, we're here to effect change. That's why we're here, I believe. And it's coming across as if it's more bureaucratic discussion and we're not actually moving forward and getting to some dialogue and actually doing some work. I'm expressing my feelings here, but there's a lot of, and I hear you bring forward the regulatory stuff. I get all of that, but that's why we're here, because some of that's got to change, right? That's why I think we from that Warren article of the town meeting, there was a call for change, and the HD said, okay, fine, let's go and talk about the change, and let's have that collaboration. But it feels like we're not getting there, and we're just coming up with reasons and discussions to not actually get to the real work.
Do you identify change as us allowing solar panels to be on the front of buildings? Is that what you consider? We identified those before you went away, some things we thought would change, we could change. But if the goal from the beginning, which is what that seemed like, is to just dumb down the HDC's regulatory ability on these things, that's not what this work group wants to do. We want to keep our integrity of what our mission is and come up with ideas of how to integrate them in a better way, but not say, okay, you know, we can't have control over anything.
Well, you know, to that effect, I served on the Management Advisory Board for a number of years. And the island has about, I'm guessing, 260 solar installations in the last couple of years. And we're seeing more and more requests for solar installations in Madigan. In every instance, the advisory board looked favorably on solar power. We looked at each project to see if there was sufficient ground area for a ground array with a south-facing orientation similar to what the roof panels were. And in those cases, which is most of the cases, because most of the lots in Madigan are half to over 10 acres. In every single case, when the Madigan Advisory Board voted in favor of the solar installation, however, they preferred a ground array in accordance with the established guidelines that the HDC works on. In every single case, it was voted to put them on the roof, no matter what they looked like, no matter what the neighbor said, and how it was destroying the rural nature of Mattocket, didn't matter. We didn't want them on the ground, we want them up on a roof. In every case, it was approved that way. So I don't see that the HDC is not doing what the solar industry on the island wants, even when it doesn't go along with the established guidelines.
Well,
Can I?
yeah,
So that's a segue. I mean, Tim, you're a very articulate person, obviously very intelligent. And you're well-spoken, but this idea that the town meeting said, go back and affect change, I don't think that's entirely accurate. Or at least they didn't say that the vote was to not, the overwhelming, I think it was a 4-1 vote, was not to alter the founding act. And then to have a discussion on how things might change. That was certainly the intent when I stood up and I indicated that this would be an HDC determined work group, an HDC work group determined by the HDC. So I think, and I don't have an issue with the affecting change personally. I just want to be clear about that. I think it's important to be looking at, we can't be stuck in our ways just to be stuck in our ways. That's not living, that's existing, and it's not what we're built for. We're not advancing. But the idea is that it wasn't this unbound affect change. It came with the concept that the majority of people had voted not to that day. And perhaps going forward, which I guess we'll find out next year, change the legislation to just put solar in everywhere on Nantucket. You may recall that I gave specific examples of streets where the HDC's hands would be tied if that article had changed the way it had been proposed. And historic streets, not inside the historic districts, Wisconsin or town. And you'll forgive me for talking, but it's just how I am. Those streets were listed out, and I think that people took that to heart and said, well, gee, yeah, what are we doing? We're just going to give an unbounded approval to solar across the National Historic Landmark. No, we don't want that. That's how I interpreted the vote. And in addition, we do want to have some discussion. We would like to see if a work group can come up with solutions. But then that segues to what the HDC has been doing. I think I think we need to be intellectually honest here. The HDC approved the vast majority. I'm sorry, Bill, you're on that side.
That's
I don't
okay.
mean to be. I'm just
All
trying
right.
to speak to the group. The HDC approves the vast majority of the applications to come before it, even the ones that aren't within our guidelines, which I think is the point Bruce is making. The guidelines indicate that wherever possible, there should be a ground array. And the HDC regularly approves panels on a roof, sometimes where they could be visible from the street, which is also against the guidelines, but subject to mitigation. The affecting change that I anticipated would occur as a result of this process was a little more limited. And it was that the HDC would continue to do its job as, I'll recognize a sec. The HDC would continue to do its job as it has, as everyone at annual town meeting knows, but that it would try and develop a process and see if there was some way to better integrate solar, which was the words I used, better integrating solar installations, better integrating sustainable energy, so that we could move that ball forward. So let's say the HDC approves 94 to 96% of the applications in front of it. We're talking about a spread of 4 to 6%. It's important along those lines that any work group understand that this isn't just a pure research carte blanche. How are we going to reinvent solar installations in a historic landmark? So if you want to speak, go ahead, and I've still got my notes.
So I want to thank the HDC, right? Because for the majority of the applications that are brought to them, they are approved. And I'll go further and say that to support what you said, Stephen, which is that over the course of the last 18 months, what has been approved wouldn't have been approved perhaps 3 or 4 years ago. And I think that's fantastic. And the community, I believe, appreciates that. But then I do need to bring some data and fact to the table. That projects that are brought to the HDC are a fraction of the projects that the solar installers are asked to do. And the solar installers turn away the clients, turn away the prospects, because they know that the projects have absolutely no chance of being approved by the HDC. And that is data and fact.
Okay.
And so simply because it's just too, it would bog you guys down, right? It's expensive for us and it wastes the residents' time. It's
I'd add to that, it's also
I'm
equally,
missing something.
Wait, just let Andy go, please.
Just
He
to-
hasn't had a chance.
just to piggyback on that. First of all, do you know the percentage? Do you know that percentage of projects that are not even pursued?
So there's two levels of filtering taking place here. The community also understands it. The community understands very well the HDC's position. And in fact, from my conversations with the community believes it's worse than it actually is. There are plenty of people that we talk to that call us up and say, I know we're not allowed to have solar on Nantucket, but I was just wondering because I did hear that somebody did it. And that's kind of where I believe the bulk of the community is today on Nantucket. They believe they can't do solar because of that. That's where the perception is. So given that, I think that there's so many projects that people don't even bother investigating because they have this perception that you can't do solar on Nantucket. Now, for the ones that do come to us, I think we probably turn away about 30 or 40%.
And how many of those are on the front of a structure, visible?
Those are obviously, clearly, those are the ones that are the problematic ones, right? The majority, Steve.
And how many communities, historic communities with the, have a National Historic Landmark designation across the entirety of, what are we, 300 and, what's our acreage? Like, we're 52 miles long and 13 miles wide.
49
No.
square miles.
49
square
miles.
miles.
Right, yeah, well, we're 13 by 15. We're basically like
Three
Sierra
by-
Lake.
I thought.
52 miles circumference or something. How many of those, have you looked into, and this is one of the things we ask that the students do, is to calibrate kind of an index of different historic communities with historic designations, their size, their age, types of things like that, their relevance, what the depth and breadth of that historic relevance is versus Nantucket's. Now, they wouldn't be comparing them. They would basically be providing the information so that we all as a group could be ascertaining the relevance of these. And then from there, we've got a profile. What are their typical installations that are being approved? Are they on the front of the homes? Are they on the front of homes in an area bordering the historic proper district? Are they within the historic district? And I think it's fair, and this goes back to the point earlier, is the HDC is rightfully not interested in a survey that's going to say, well, we want to have solar on historic homes. We would not be doing diligently our duties or expending our agency for the community if we were to allow that. I used an example of putting the solar on the front of the 3 bricks because a survey said we want more solar. Well, everyone wants more solar. I want more solar. One sec, I want more solar. I'm not going to have an electric bill. There's all these wonderful things that are going to come of it. It helps the environment and so on and so forth. Yes, people are going to say they want it, but to bring that then to the HDC and have the HDC put in a position where they're not only between a rock and a hard place, they're also being characterized as, flat earthers, for God's sake. It just was not part of what we wanted to see happen, and I don't think that's unreasonable. I'm going to do Bruce because he did try to speak earlier, and then you. And we'll get through it. We all have a lot to say. We'll say it.
Now, Tim, I'm very curious what you said about people think you can't have solar in Nantucket. Matticat conducted the first of several surveys to recraft its area. We surveyed 690 email addresses in Matticat that covers almost 700 properties. And we asked questions, screen rules, we asked questions, things like solar panels. response, and it's only like 2, 3 questions. And they were unbiased questions. Do you know you can? Are you interested in? Things of that nature. Almost 70% knew and were interested in the possibility of having solar panels. Okay, so when you say that there's a perception that you can't have solar panels, Manicat represents about 1/3 of Nantucket. So I find a comment like that, I'd like to see some backup documentation to that. I'm friendly with Tobias. We bump heads every application trying to get his solar panels on the ground. I have friends who have large lots. Homer Ray, you may know him, a plumber. He has a large ground-mounted solar facility on his property. He's very pleased with how it works. The neighbors are not offended by it. It's buffered by vegetation and things of that nature. There's room to have advanced technologies. And my view is solar is like a little tiny step in the big steps. I think we're gonna go to the way the Navy drives their boats.
Bruce, can
But
I don't want to pick up, but I want to bring you back to the central thing here is the discussion is about I understand, but I just want to bring you back to the WPI student project.
I wanted to just his comment. And you said there are 2 levels of filtering. You didn't mention 1.
Well, I did, I mentioned both.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now you say,
I'm gonna let you talk, but I just want to clarify, my understanding, Bruce, was that, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but basically Tim's saying that there is a perception amongst some people who come to them that, for instance, let's use another example, you can't use aluminum gutters on Nantucket. Now, they're not selling aluminum gutters, and you can use aluminum gutters on Nantucket. But in their experience with solar installations, what Tim is sharing, and I take it at face value, is that people come to them and say, oh, I thought I couldn't have solar on Nantucket. I totally understand. I take that at face value. I just want to clarify my perception. You wanted to speak. I apologize. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think the point I wanted to make was to one of your earlier comments, Stephen, which is that I again, from the people that we talk to, and I obviously interface with everyone that's it's about solar, right? I do think the community is very supportive of limiting solar as a function of historic areas on the island. Like, for example, downtown Nantucket, downtown Swansea, and let's call it high visibility, Baxter Road, you know, areas like that. People, when we talk to them, they are sympathetic to that, and they appreciate what the HDC is doing to protect those areas. It's the scenarios where it's that Cape House in, you know, the middle of Tom Nevers, and it's on the front of the house. And it's in those areas there where that house was built in the mid to late 80s that gets denied, that they feel this is the opportunity for collaboration and change. And why can't they have solar on that? They feel there's nothing historic about their home. They're just trying to lower their energy bill. No one ever goes by it. That's I think the area that we should be focusing the discussion on. How can we solve for that? I don't think anyone's looking to put solar on Main Street in downtown Nantucket.
Sure. And I don't disagree with you, but what we're looking for, this is just an opportunity to clarify in very simple terms. But the HDC, what we're looking to accomplish out of diligence to our charge is that there would be a balanced review of the information required to make the decisions on how that happens. And that is based upon our understanding of what we've experienced to date. And that's why, you know, when you feel like you're an elected member of a commission and you feel like you're kind of getting put in a little bit of a box, you push back a little bit. I think we've been respectful in doing so. I apologize if that's necessary. I think it's unfortunate that anyone would mistake my diligence towards our charge as micromanaging. Nothing could be further than the truth. I would like to have nothing, I would like to be able to set some very clear goals and move on. Let's move on. This isn't the fun part. This is not fun. This is a drag. I mean, I'm using like really technical words here, but this is just, it's not worthwhile. Life is too short for this kind of thing. But you can't move past it if you don't have parties sitting at the table willing, both groups, to move forward. That's how we end up in pitched battles and further. The irony, I want to say this, I've said it before, is that to be characterized as someone who is not interested in moving this ball forward, which is not Tim, not speaking directly to you, but it's kind of the collective I'm getting from this. Nothing could be further than the truth. Val, I think you would say I'm the most likely elected commissioner to be shepherding this type of thing through the HDC. And then to be the person who's like being characterized as someone who's obstructing it and wants to control it.
And Tim said that.
No, I
at
didn't,
all.
I didn't say, I was
Okay,
saying,
so I think we need to get beyond the personal attack because there isn't one here.
Well,
But
no,
can,
but-
can we respond to Tim's comment directly then, for the sake of record? When Tim suggests that there are people in, say, Tom Nevers that might like to have.
I wanted to respond to that one briefly.
I'd
That
like
was
to
a
say
very
something.
wait.
It's a very
Yeah.
interesting comment he made.
So,
About
so can we put it on the front of the
So
roof and
the
Tom Nevers
question
on
that-
the road facing?
I'm sorry, the question that arises is if there's a concern that the house in Tom Nevers is being treated differently than some historic structure somewhere or something. And they get upset because they can't put solar panels on the front of their house and whatnot. My question is that, well, what's wrong with doing the same? And you said because they want to save their money on their electric bill. What's wrong with them putting the solar panels on the ground and saving the same amount of money on their electric bill?
Because it's 40% more expensive to put it on the ground.
but,
I don't think
but
so.
at what cost
I
to
don't
the
think so.
historic,
Of course it is.
to the character and setting of Nantucket? If you drive out Tom Nevers Road,
Where'd you get that?
or if you drive down Longwood, or if you drive down Chuck Hollow,
Mhm.
to the extent you see these structures, because you know that I've approved multiple of these that you can't see on the front of a house. But to the extent you can see them, so that the answer is not as simple as yes or no. The answer is about the details and the context. And that's what I hope this work group would be working on, developing the details about.
Mhm.
So
Absolutely.
as was stated earlier on, we could be developing consentable approvals so that it was in Tom Nevers, it's on a particular street based upon, the location, based upon the topography, based upon the vegetation. This is a consentable application, boom, it's done. We're looking to promote that. The other thing I think that makes a difference is if you take a drive down Duke's Road, Chuck Lenhart's place, I can't think of the address.
25.
Beautiful installation, beautiful example of an installation of, into my personal taste, or my personal perception rather, of a solar installation that is visible from the street. It's not on the primary mast, but it's directly visible from the street. The way that it's been laid out on the roof, the extent to which the proportions on the roof, the fact that it's rectilinear like the roof, it's not a sawtooth, that it's on a black roof. All of these things are points I'm making to illustrate where there is, I don't think, too much of an ask, and I'm gonna clarify that in a second, relative to what's being too much been asked on the HDC's part relative to the benefit to the homeowner who is getting a reduction on their electric bill and benefiting the island to some extent. The thing I want to clarify, because this comes up too in discussions, it was mentioned that a ground array is more expensive. Well, what is the expense relative to changing the character and setting of the historic landmark? If you're in rural Mattocket where the homes are very close to the streets versus Tom Nevers, you're in Mattocket where in areas where you can see every roof plane, that is a different type of an application and solution in my mind. And those are the things I wish we'd be discussing. The last part of that is that I'll just let it go. That's enough.
We even approved the first application on the island of these solar roof shingles?
No, we have some already on Dukes
Well,
Road,
well,
but
it
not
did-
the Tesla.
they didn't present it that way
Yeah.
to us, but anyway, we approved this because we want to see solar, and we thought that would be less offensive than black panels on gray roofs,
Right.
which is what we're getting in Madigan.
Well,
So, Will Stevens, conscientious objector. You know, I kind of came in this late. I would say a couple things. One, I would say, you know, we're all in the industries that we're, you know, we all in the building industry, we're all on boards that, you know, are potentially in conflict, you know, so. But we're also then the people who have experience in the industry to have something, you know, can bring something a little bit extra to the table, first thing. Second off, I would say this meeting has been pretty illustrative from an outsider's perspective, with having missed the beginning part. I really am lacking understanding on how we just spent an hour basically talking, the HDC defending a position that nobody officially has asked them to give up, right? And so as a citizen, I can say, I can come up, I have come up on my own, and we've had conversations with friends and coworkers, et cetera, alternatives. Like that we could actually, everybody could have solar, everybody can have solar. Maybe it's not on their own house, right? So there's other options
Well,
besides,
we discussed that.
we don't have to, right, we just don't have to say it's on, you know, we have like HDC has to let it on the front of the roof or not. I mean, there's a very wide gray area in there. And ground array is not always the answer. As an agriculturalist, I constantly fight ground arrays because they tend to be on the best agricultural land because it's easy to work on. It's flat. It doesn't have a lot of rock in it, right? So ground arrays can be, in my opinion, okay in the small residential area if you can't, you know, but then you have more screening options too, right? So, you know, everybody's gonna have a dog in the fight. And so, you know, what I'm saying is like, how do we get back to, everybody's kind of had their say here. How do we get back to what is the path forward? How do we re-engage the conversation in a manner that is not creating the impetus for defensiveness so much as, you know, problem solving?
so, wait, I want to get us,
I want to get thought.
no, just indulge me as the chair. I wanted to get clarification, Will, when you say HCC defending a position not being asked to give up, you're referring to on the front of the house or
Yeah.
something else? Okay, I just wanted to make sure I
Specifically, that's what we both have been talking
yeah,
about.
no, I just wanted to make sure I understood. That was the go-to example because, and the reason, the basis for that, the rationale is because typically that's what we don't approve. And
I
only in
understand how we got
sensitive,
to that.
that's why we got to. The other part of it was, yeah, you know, we have spoke about shared solar and we appreciate that. That concept and we want to get into that discussion. And Bruce will give me 30 seconds. But this is exactly where we are. What we're here discussing today is that the HDC was basically given the concept of a resource for information. And then we were told that in essence, our contribution was, and maybe we misunderstood what the goal of the WPI student project was, but we understood it to be that it was to benefit this work group. And if it's to benefit the work group, it's an HDC work group. So we wanted the HDC to have input. One of the things we wanted to have input on was this concept of share. We talked about this in depth. If it's a ground array, if it's in between homes,
A solar garden.
solar, what are the issues? Zoning issues, licensing issues, electrical permitting issues, all these, a variety of topics that we don't have the resources to develop, but these students could be. So those, what we're talking about is having a seat, you know, I guess what I'm lamenting to some extent is we don't have a seat at that table, so we're not going to get the information we need to come up with the good solutions that are informed. We can come up with a list of solutions, but if we don't have, just a second.
I know, but I never get to say anything.
You always get to say something, just a second. If we don't have the information to make informed decisions and recommendations, then what are we really doing? We could just all go home and make a list and then send it in and we could collate it and take out the stuff that's repetitive and call it a day. Go ahead, Bill.
I had expressed interest in wanting the students to do something that is always been a question in my mind. Does it always have to be south? Because if the front is south, what would the decrease in energy, or however you measure it, be if it was on the west? And why wouldn't that be viable to power a house? Or is the goal to power a house and make money? When we first started solar applications coming in, it was, I don't know how we thought we were gonna know this, but enough panels to power the house. And I think sometimes we get away from that. I know you're gonna be able to answer this. And I also have read that you can get power if it's on the west. And in the Northeast, that's actually pretty excellent solution because it's at the part of the day when the sun is going, you know what I mean? Like, it's a longer part of the day. So when someone comes in and says to us, if it can't be on the south, it's not gonna work.
Right.
What does that mean? It's not gonna work. No, I'm,
Yeah, look, and it's very easy, it
Yeah.
really is, and you can use this going forward,
Yeah.
right? It's a simple math. If it's on the east or the west, it's anywhere between a 15 to 20% loss, okay, relative to the south. If it's on the north, it's like 30 to 40% loss, unless it's a very flat pitch, right? The flatter the pitch, obviously you're bringing in more sun, but east and west think 15 to 20, north think 30 to 40.
but that could still be a viable array.
It can be, but, and then in simple terms, that break-even point for the system would go from 7 or 8 years to 10 or maybe 12 years, right? And that's how a consumer thinks of it.
Which is very important information, which we've also discussed in recent previous meetings. We wanted the students to come up with this information based on the most 3 regional products. So we and others had objective information to make decisions. Part of that decision-making process is mitigation. Part of it is, okay, we have the cost. Should it, again, I'm gonna go back to character and setting. We're talking about specific examples. In Mattakit, because it costs someone 15% more and they have a 15% decrease, but it's on the front of what, if that was a smaller historic district, could be considered a historic structure, or it is a contributing structure. We need information to figure out in our little tiny human calculator brains what the trade-off is, what is a viable, what's mitigation, what's not, what's the information that's involved. And we don't have a resource for that. And that's, again, why I'm trying to get us to the point where we do.
As a designer here, you know, you would know, we bring plenty of projects to the table that are on the east and the west. We don't, you know, that's very viable. But you can just imagine that there's a lot of homes where that they only have that front, you know, they've got the options they have are front or rear. They don't have an east or a west. On some of the capes, for example, there just isn't an east or a west. And so, and then, so going on the north really isn't financially viable. I mean, when you're in that 30 to 40% range, for a lot of people, that's just not.
Well, and we also talked about coming up with guidelines for houses that will be built. If you're considering it on the front end, plan
Yeah.
how that's gonna work.
Yeah.
So it's, we're not,
And the
and
students,
like not make sure there's no pipe on that side, so it does that. I mean,
Well, we could talk, let's have
A black
These are
roof.
the things we want to talk about.
right, but also,
The building code addresses some of it.
yeah, I mean, so the plumbing, plumbing is gonna have to be, the standpipe can be anywhere, it's 300 feet, basically 200 or 300 feet. So on most Nantucket homes, the length of that, you're gonna have increases for your 45s and your 90s, but there's no reason that if there was a guideline established, some of which we would want the students to do research on, because there's other topics they could be looking into that would relate to integrating these systems into new homes, more than just putting them on the outside of the house, more than just relocating your stack pipe. And I keep going back to that because that's what's on our agenda and that's what we're supposed to be talking about. Is not that it's not that we're gonna have, you know, a shortage of ideas. It's having information that's gonna back things up and help the HDC. Again, as the person most likely to shepherd these through, the HDC, having information is very helpful. So we can talk about these, the goal was that we get together and we talk about all these solutions and then we try and put them into guidelines and we have the students help with illustrations and so on and so forth. I will reach out to Lauren and see if there's some way that we can bridge a gap. I've always had a respectful, amicable working relationship with her. So clearly there's something going on with, you know, and I'll take responsibility on perceptions too, with where we're coming from, that it's being personalized because it's not the intention, and try and see if there's some way we can salvage getting our involvement with the students. Because we need that information to move forward in a, I think, in a material way.
Thank you. I just want to make some known to you folks. There's a broken process here that somehow takes both sides to fix. And I want to encourage the survey to go forward, but not in a manner where the process drives the outcome.
But that's what surveys do.
That's what you want to be careful of.
That was our concern.
Right now, I put an application into RISE because I wanted to help reach some side of an acceptable compromise to balance the HDC's mission, preserve, protect historic structures, with what the objective of the folks who are interested in sustainability. I retired after 50 years as an owner's rep coordinating projects all the country, Guam, France, and we've installed hundreds of acres of solar. We've put them on buildings from San Diego to Maine, from Florida to Washington State. I understand the process and I understand the opponents and the pros. I've dealt with both sides. There are compromises. Nantucket has a 92-acre solar overlay district that was passed by a very complimentary vote at a town meeting that allowed us to become a green community. It's the 5th step. 92 acres of a solar overlay is meant to be ground arrays. There are compromise solutions to achieve the electrical generation that would, some people say, prevent a 3rd cable. We're probably going to have a 4th or 5th cable if we keep growing the way we're going. But the point is, there's a lot of things going on that I don't think that the island is getting credit for in terms of how it deals with sustainability. But there are also issues in different communities about preserving the characteristics of the community that made the people buy into the community, take out loans, paying off their home loans, so they can live there because they like the character of the neighborhood, and that character is changing without them having input. So I joined this committee to see if it was possible to achieve some kind of balance, not my way or the highway, and to walk out of the possibility of a survey or a study, even if it's by undergraduates who have no concept of what sustainability is in the big picture. The input from that survey could provide some insights. It's valuable. And that's my statement.
Thank you, Bruce. I don't think anyone questions the legitimacy of a well-defined survey, and I think we all support that. I think we're getting a little lost in the concept that the WPI students project is about a survey. It is not. It is about a multitude of tasks, and it's only part of it. So again, I will reiterate that I will reach out to Lauren and Holly and see if we might be able to work something out. I think it's important, and perhaps they will be receptive. I hope so. On the general topic of, I guess, still under this cooperation, collaboration, and related matters, are there any other thoughts from individuals on, I'll just open it up unless Dale, you want to comment first. Just what we've been talking about, but you want to get out into the public record, or you want us, with respect to the WPI student project.
I have nothing to say that I haven't said on that before, and I'm disappointed because I thought I handled it very professionally by handing out my comments on a piece of paper to them, simply asking for some rewording, and apparently never got anywhere.
Yeah, and I'll just say that, the core of this was I think the kind of sense of being disenfranchised was that, the original dialogue that, or the description that the students received, which the HDC found troubling, but also just their, just acknowledging and working through that the town's goal, which is to, install solar on homes, individual projects. I mean, this is on the town's website, is on its face, and not irreconcilably, there's workarounds, incongruent with the HDC's mission. And that was what I had hoped to accomplish and what I still hope to accomplish. Tim?
So good luck with, I would look, when I heard about the WPI engagement, I was so excited because I've hired a lot of people at the WPI over the years in my software work, and they're some of the best students you can find because they tend to be pragmatic. So that's one comment, and the other, this is a suggestion. Could we develop an agenda, a charter for a series of topics over a timeline with a goal?
Yeah, well, our goal is to get to the point that we're doing that.
But that if we could start with that,
Well,
let's get, because I feel like that would really help get us focused, right? We know on this week, we're going to talk about this, on this week, we're going to talk about this, and on this week, we're going to talk about this.
yeah, you're not sharing anything. I'm going to jump in because you're not sharing. It's the late hour. You're not sharing, appreciate it. We all agree that is our next step. What we were trying to deal with now was acceptance into the WPI student project process. And that's why that's the topic of the agenda. And that's, where we are in our process currently. Whether we are going to be working with them or not, yes, our next step is to sit down and our next meeting will be to have a discussion on, two things. What we want to get to is the discussion on where we're going and how we're going to get there. Before we do that, we actually need to have a work group for it. We currently will be making a recommendation that Bruce's application is accepted. We anticipate Mr. Buccino's interest form will be submitted and accepted.
Block that.
And
Thank you, Val.
so,
Please do it.
we're trying to move forward with balls in the air here because, that's just the nature of the process. But yes, well received, point well taken. And that's certainly where we're trying to head is, what do we think we're going to do and how do we think we're going to do it? And then map it out so we can function on a regular schedule that works for people who are on the work group, who feel they want to attend, perhaps set up a Zoom link, like a real functioning work group. That's where we're headed. The work group actually hasn't totally been formed yet, due to not having, I anticipated 3 weeks ago that at this meeting, at the last meeting, we'd be looking at 5 applications. We would be looking through them. We'd make a recommendation to the HDC this Tuesday, and we'd be forming a work group. And then we would be doing exactly what you just suggested. But that's, unfortunately, sometimes life doesn't work out the way you think it might. Will, I see you itching, are you just itching to get up?
Yeah, just cramping up.
Andy, you've been.
Yeah, one last comment from my perspective on the WPI student study and their group. We heard at the beginning of this meeting that there's already been 8 or 9 studies done So there's nothing saying that HDC can't engage specific to the 10th or the next WPI study. I feel like we were a little bit behind the 8 ball out of the gates. We've done some good brainstorming, but I think the work group is going to put on the table a lot of exceptional ideas that need really deep further exploration. And without that process, I don't think we can challenge the WPI students to have a very conscientious study. And they're only here for a few months or a few
Yeah.
weeks even. So I appreciate reaching out with an olive branch for the sake of the relationships between our groups. But let's understand that this isn't the last one. It's not the only group that can do research.
Right.
So let's discover what we need to know and let's figure it out.
So let's get some elaboration on that. One, I think from the HDC standpoint, not the most important, but the one that popped into my head initially because we had discussion earlier, is how do you see that fitting into what if this work group doesn't put out a viable product, a recommendation, integrating solar, how do you see, there's a timeline associated with that, right?
Right.
Annual town meeting, articles are due in 2 months or less. You've said this before, and I don't disagree with you, that to, fully assess some of this information and really come up with, some really bang on recommendations that can be transformative. We're looking at Nantucket, not next year, not in 3 years, but 2050, 2060, 2070, and not just solar, but others. There's a disconnect between those timelines, and I'm kind of curious your thoughts on bridging those.
I haven't been challenged with the timeline. We're just getting started. So
Well, I mean, I'm giving you the
2 months from today, I'd be happy if we have an agenda.
well,
Let's start looking at what the real opportunity is.
Well,
We're not going to have anything done before the next articles get submitted.
well, that's what I'm saying is that the pressure is to try and come up with something.
Whose pressure?
I think the pressure my sense is that there's pressure to accomplish some type of, and maybe I'm wrong, some type of a recommendation, because otherwise we're going to be called to task at town meeting, and we're going to have to stand up and defend ourselves as a work group when we haven't really had enough time to be able to accomplish that goal. If we're going to do the process you're suggesting, which is a more thorough, drawn out process involving not only WPI students, but others. And so that's the pressure that I feel. I want to shepherd this thing through and get it. I want to come up with recommendations. But I don't see how that coincides with your comments. So I'm trying to get some
Well,
feedback.
I haven't been aware of that was the goal, to have something ready for the next
Yeah, it's
submittals for
confusing.
articles. Yeah, there's no way
Are
that
we
that's
trying
happening.
to put
No,
forth
no,
an
no,
article at town meeting?
No,
No.
stop, please. No. I'm saying that's the pressure that I feel.
I see.
I'm not saying that that's our goal. And I'm asking under a timeline of separately, under a timeline of having this revisited annual town meeting, how do you all see that coming up with our not having a work product?
So the concern is, are we still gonna be perceived as objectionable or obstacle
Obstructionist.
blockers? And
Right.
there'll be another call to task at town meeting.
Or is that the intent, is to make us perceived as obstructive?
I don't want to go
I
there.
don't think so.
I don't want, I understand your comment, but it's speculative without basis. I don't want to, that's not our role, and I don't want to go into that. I was just interested, Andrea and Andy, in your perspective of the process, acknowledging that I mean, maybe I'm presuming incorrectly. You spoke on the article at town meeting. Tim, you were involved. What's your perspective? If this work group doesn't come up with a recommendation for October 15th, when the deadline is for, I don't know what the deadline is, I'm just saying a date. I think it's sometime in October. Maybe it's November, but by the deadline, is that your trigger for resubmitting an article to change the HDC's enabling act?
I didn't know we were working toward doing it.
No, I'm sorry. I just want to be clear.
Yeah, of course it is.
I mean, I have people calling us saying, can I put solar panels on my roof yet?
Yeah.
And the standard response we give today is no. But there is a committee and there's a cross-functional committee looking to, I'll say what I say, improve things. Looking to make, and potentially, yes, but there's a work, so I'm like holding people up.
Can you clarify though, when you say people call me and ask if they can put solar on my roof and I say no,
Right.
I want to understand that better. You say that to everyone?
No, to the.
The 30% he spoke to
Right.
earlier.
Okay, no, I just want.
And there's a pool of people that are like in the parking lot.
Yeah.
But they can't, there's no other possible solution.
No, they got nothing. They got nothing.
That's
a real
the-
thing.
This is the struggle.
That's a real
that I'm
thing.
They
having.
got, I mean, but
Right.
it's true that I'm not making it up.
Yeah.
mean, if
I
there
know,
was a
but
solution,
so
I'd
what-
bring it to you.
Yeah, right.
But what that comes to me as is, this is about changing the HDC
No,
stance on this.
No, it's about us developing conceptually some opportunity.
And it's.
And it may be localized community solar, right?
Right.
So a
Right.
cul-de-sac might have a central.
Tim says for the record,
Yeah, I mean.
but no, this is good discussion.
Yeah, right, no,
Because this is
absolutely.
the meat. Now, I just want to be clear. There are, organizational processes where we would focus on this critical aspect. The problem is this is the aspect that has the most potential conflict. So given where we are in our process, I am not going to volunteer that this is the segment we focus on
Yeah, sure.
initially. It would be counterproductive. I think you would all agree. But I think
But
this
that's
is
the meat and the
good
potatoes,
discussion.
right?
But so the meat and the potatoes then is, what I want is to know,
Well, I'm answering your, I'm trying to
Yeah,
answer your question.
yeah.
So I feel like based on what happened at town meeting and based on what, the calls that we come in, the responses we get, people are waiting. They're right, we're like, okay, fine, let's see if that cross-functional group can come up with something. And if it moves the needle, then great, we solved the problem. If it doesn't, who knows? I mean, maybe someone drafts a warrant article.
Well, so that's where
I-
I'm really struggling because
I don't
now it's solar panels, what's it gonna be next?
right, so we're also looking
Looking
at,
at the bigger picture,
from the
every time
HDC
somebody has a special interest. They're gonna come in and change the legislation so that it works in their favor.
which our chair spoke to on the floor town meeting. I want to see if I can pin Tim down. He's squirrely on this. I'm teasing. But the idea that you say someone might write an article, what I'm asking is your group, what is your group? Do you guys have a deadline? Are you anticipating that something gets brought forth for this town meeting in time that you would be able to recognize it as acceptable or not? And if it's not, that you're going to put forward for an article?
As of now, in good faith, there has been no discussion of it.
Okay, because that's the pressure I'm thinking of relative to the, Val's point, the overall opening up Pandora's box of changing the legislation based on one thing. So that's the nature of the pressure that I feel to get something done.
And I think that's fair, though. I think we should all feel that pressure.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right? That's why we're here,
Yeah, I
right?
I don't wanna be on one more committee.
Right?
Yeah, we're all volunteers.
You
here.
have lots of time, Val.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I think, like, this is the kind of discussion I hope we would be having all along. It's very helpful to me. I hope it's helpful to you guys. I would certainly like to be focusing the group, my role here is facilitator on meat and potatoes versus, right now, what we've been looking at is operations and management, and it's still an open question, some aspects of that. The work group itself, interacting with the students, so on and so forth. We want to get into goals and objectives, actionables, deliverables. That's where we're headed next. That will be our discussion at the next meeting. I'm happy to ask you if you have any thoughts on what our next meeting should be about. Other than that, and then I'll ask them.
I was thinking everybody could come up with a list, maybe. I know, I feel like this is our group, but, of their perspective, I don't know, like what
Will's
you
getting
are
volunteered.
hoping to achieve out of this.
Yeah.
And some thoughts. And no, it can't be next week.
Okay, so on
I have
that,
a wedding.
okay. Andy, any comments on that?
Yeah, I think that to speak to town meeting and public perception of the success of this group, I think we should walk out of the next meeting with the critical timeline and the critical path of what our success looks like. And that's not 2 months.
Can I push back on that a little bit? That sounds very specific without our having an idea of what our resources are. You mentioned resources other than the WPI students. I took that to be published reference material, but also perhaps some other group that could do things for us. We don't, in order to get to the specificity that you're talking about, we don't know what our capacity to engage resources are. So I'm suggesting that it would be an iterative process to get to what you're talking about, which is the long way of saying, I don't think next
Yeah,
meeting. we're
fair
gonna get
enough.
to that.
Let's not wait 6 months to say it's gonna be another 6 months.
Yeah, I
Let's-
agree.
Let's keep that at the forefront of our agenda to acknowledge that there is a public pressure and expectation that there is a product that comes out of this work group. And acknowledge it and either publish it or make it part of the record here.
I think that's a fair and good way to proceed. Tim?
I agree. Let's have a charter and an agenda and put a draft timeline against it with a goal of some asset, which is an updated document being produced at the end of it.
Yeah, so we have the charter that the HDC voted. And we can formulate that into more of this specific or a more tangible document that includes goals of the various parties. I think expectations, Val mentioned, having people clarify their expectations is an important one. I would ask that regardless of which side of the aisle you're on, if it's HDC, that it is, and I think it will be, those expectations are clarified, not only based on the HDC charter for the work group, which is on the interest form, but also, you know, as we've been discussing, with an eye towards what we think might be able to change. So you all have a clear expectation of what we're thinking. And then from the other side of the aisle, someone who's disinterested, industry knowledgeable but disinterested party other than, you know, the benefit of the community, what your expectations are, what you would like to accomplish, keeping in mind the charter as, you know, general guardrails, but not like, you know, rigid posts that, you know, like this wide to work your way through. And then, Tim, and I know, Will, you're dying to write this up, you know, over a cup of tea or coffee and put your expectations out, but your expectations too. So we have a clarity when we're sitting
Well, I
around the
sent you a
table.
doc- I mean, I remember I sent that to you for what that's worth, but. you
No,
know,
I have your overlay,
yeah,
but so
It's just an idea. That's a starting point,
Yeah.
right? Right? Some concepts.
I'm talking more, I think what you're referring to is, what are your expectations of what's the other side look like?
Sure.
And
Right,
maybe
that's-
even how you want to get there,
I-
because that's part of our process
maybe
is
even
how we're
try
going to
and
develop it.
quantify,
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's, I mean, that's,
right?
I don't want, I think in order to quantify it, we need you guys to give us input.
Yeah.
Because otherwise we're just quantifying what we expect or believe should happen.
Like, in my mind, it was like we did the last time we were together. That was great. Like, yes, we'll make recommendations about pipes on the roof so that everything is streamlined across. The solar garden idea, the whatever, just, it was ideas of how to make the whole thing better. I forgot what I was just saying.
Okay.
So I get lost in all this. Let's just make a list and get it going.
Yay,
Well,
seconded.
yeah.
Do you want to meet the week of September 19th?
One second on that. Just while we're still in expectations, Will had mentioned something earlier, and I'd like to get, not now, it's late, at some point, some additional context about ideas that he talked to different people about for solar that's not necessarily, if I
Yeah.
understood you correctly, on your roof or necessarily a ground array. So not suggesting now, if I misunderstood you, that's fine too, but you know, those are things we'd like to know. I want to get to the meat and potatoes too, guys, but you know, my role is to get the operations and management squared away because otherwise this is going to be a mess. We worked through as far as we can with the WPI students. Olive Branch will go out. We'll see if we can develop that. I think next week or next time we meet, it's a list of clarifying your expectations, cognizant of the charter, We can send that out. We can forward that to you guys, Tim and Will, if you want it. But also, I think in the interest of whether we get, if we can be involved with the WPI students, specific projects we would, specific items we would like to see them work on in the project. And whether it's a priority or not. So 1, 2, 3, because if we get a window to work with them, I'd rather, I'd like to collate it and we look at it quickly here because we're behind, it is kind of last minute with respect to their processes already started. It'd be much easier if I get a list of 10 things from everyone of work items for them, if we have a prioritization so that we don't, then we can collate it. We can spend 15 or 20 minutes, half an hour talking about those before we try and move them forward with the sponsors.
If you wouldn't mind just letting us know if that opportunity becomes available.
Yeah, I will. Yeah, I don't want you to waste your
I
time.
don't want you guys not to meet next week because I can't.
Well, so currently we're meeting because we don't have enough people to actually set up the work group.
Next week is my chemo week.
Yeah.
Next week is our wedding week.
So we won't have a
Yeah.
quorum is the
I
bottom
got
line.
mine too, 20 years.
Wow.
My niece.
Congratulations.
My sisters can't.
So we can't, that was the next topic was meeting, and I just, while we're here, I'd like to get an idea of meeting days. Like Friday at 4 or 3 is not ideal.
No,
Thumbs down.
I'm
But-
with you on that.
But is there like a day, is a Thursday after 2 better, or I can do 5 in the morning, any day of the week. What do you guys want to do?
How long, were they 90-minute meetings?
Yeah, I think it would be beneficial to, Parkinson's law is that the workload will expand to meet the allocated time. So we don't want to have 2 or 3 hour meetings. I think, do we want to do an hour, hour and a half? Maybe we do an hour and a half initially so we can try and choose through some material and then we knock it down to an hour. Is that unreasonable to anyone?
Is it unreasonable to have a hybrid option?
No, we're working on that too, but we need to get a schedule set up first.
Okay.
And we need a work
You
group
mean,
before
you
we
mean
do
a call
that.
in, a Zoom option, hybrid in that sense?
Oh, I thought you meant
Tim-
like-
Yeah, I was gonna say,
We have a hybrid car out there.
if keep the timeline short because it will force the discussion.
Yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
important that we, maybe we have the next meeting or 2 is an hour and a half.
Max,
We can
Yeah.
cover a lot of ground,
Agreed.
I would
but
say 75 minutes, right?
Yeah.
If force gets emergency in there.
I think we have a timekeeper.
Thanks for reminding us that there are quarter hours.
Yes.
75 I vote for, and anything after 3.
How about 77? After 3 is
Because once we
after
walk
or
in,
equal to?
2 o'clock's right in the middle of the
They have
day.
work day.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. No, I know, I get it. So how about you, Bill?
Right.
What?
You think Thursdays at 3?
3:30,
No,
Thursday at 3:15?
not Thursday.
Not
Some
Thursday?
Thursdays I can't do.
How
but
about
I'll work-
Tuesdays at
I'll
4?
work around them.
Oh, HDC.
I
don't
don't
have
see
a
the irony.
I
there.
don't have a problem with Fridays at 3 o'clock if it's an hour and 15-minute meeting.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not looking to extend them. I'm just looking to make, I'm registering that people wanting to meat and potatoes. I'm also very clear and understanding what we need to do to get there. So I'm trying to front load a little bit of extra time so we can get through some stuff so that we can get to the meat and potatoes and meet for an hour. So that's why the only reason I suggested an hour and a half or something.
Fine, works.
But what day? Can we get some consensus on
Friday's
those?
fine with me. There's gonna be some Fridays I can't, but Friday's fine.
I'm comfortable with Fridays afternoons.
But I know you guys can't do Tuesdays. but-
No one said Wednesday,
Yeah, Wednesday's fine with me as well.
Wednesdays?
Yeah,
No?
yeah.
I prefer Wednesday over Friday.
I would also.
Yeah, I would too, although I missed.
Okay, go for it.
So Wednesday at 3:30.
And you'll have to understand, some of those Wednesdays I may have to do that,
Sure. So
if I can.
We'll shoot for Wednesday at 3:30. The next meeting will be an hour and a half,
The
This
20,
Wednesday?
no, the
No.
21st of
Okay.
September.
21st. We have a general person's agreement that the pressure is to perform, but it's not that,
I'm sorry, did you say 3 or 3:30?
pardon me?
You said 3 or 3:30?
I think 3:30 in observance of Andy's boss being here.
You might be the occasion.
Why don't we say 3? No, everybody's got to
Doesn't do
work,
anything else.
everybody's
I
got to
usually
work.
don't work
hard.
after 2 anyway.
That's good. It's good that he knows
We
that
have an
too.
amazing record collection.
I want to be clear again, expectations with regards to charter. And some ideas, regardless of whether the WPI students are involved or not, because that's going to be the very next thing we start to talk about. And we're not going to actually get into the ideas of the meat and potatoes. We're going to get into structuring a timeline, prioritizing them, putting together, making sure that it makes sense. And then the next meeting, hopefully, we can be getting into meat and potatoes.
When you use the term charter, are you talking about the act?
Yeah, no,
The
I
act?
know,
no. So the charter is in the email. I'll show you it in that right there. Tim, thank you. Appreciate your
Yes,
input.
thanks, Tim.
Very helpful.
Nice to meet you.
And to the extent anyone wants to reach out, I'm not the only one who can extend an olive branch. We're about building bridges and support is helpful. Okay, with that, I'll give you that information in a second, Bruce. Adrian, I want to thank you for coming in and sticking
Thanks,
around.
Adrian.
Is Wednesday, and I didn't want to overlook this, but we still have some people here.
Can we get the room?
Is Wednesday, well, I'm going to look into that, but is Wednesday difficult for you all as staff for any particular reason that you're aware of? Okay, good. All right, Val, we're not going to talk about best practices. The best practice is an issue for the HDC. That was one of the things on the agenda, but I hope we can get to that soon so we can start to improve that process or make recommendations on what we feel and what we're soliciting others to contribute. Arthur Reed volunteered some ideas, so on and so forth. So just know that's on the radar for OFC.
Okay,
Okay, with that, I want to thank everybody for coming and get a motion to adjourn, please.
yes, please.
Okay, on your motion,
Aye.
and I'm an aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Eventually.
And I'm bored too, that meeting could have gone on forever if one of you denied the motion.